So I want to reshare this video clip here of a very massive something or another that was drifting through the skies here in southern Nevada. And this was back in August of 2019. Okay. And at the time when I captured this, I had done several different videos and I shared information concerning the research and development of suborbital spacecrafts. Okay. What they call spacecrafts. And I would call them just glorified airplanes, really. And at the time when I had captured this and shared it, there really wasn't a whole lot of direct information available on the X-37Bs and the suborbital crafts that were being researched and developed by the space agencies. In fact, at the time when I did research into this, um, Wikipedia still had it listed as an unknown spacecraft, an unknown location. And after I posted this up and shared this, then all of a sudden somebody saw the X-37B coming in under cover of night and landing at one of the spaceports, and it got exposed and they had to admit and own up to it. And then all of a sudden the information on Wikipedia changed and all of a sudden they were acknowledging the X-37B. And I think it's curious because there's been a lot of research and development into tethers, okay? And to me, this depiction here in this capture, it looks to me like it's some kind of an aircraft with something sticking up out of it. And at the time when I captured it, I did several videos where I pulled out these individual frames and adjusted it and showed what kind of looked like to be the outline of one of those mini space shuttles with the bay doors open and a very bright light being reflected off of it. Okay. And to me, this kind of looks like a plasma ball that's forming over top of this platform here. And as it drifted to the southeast of our location, it kind of morphed and changed a little bit, but this basic shape right down here stayed. And then it started forming more of a shape of a heart, but that's another video. In this one here, I wanted to share some additional information I found very curious. When I looked at this and I started looking through some interesting information concerning tethers. Okay. And before you just dismiss it and you think it's just absolutely ridiculous because we live on a spinning ball spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour, hurling around the sun at, you know, 67,000 miles an hour, I think is what they say, right? And hurling through the universe at even more ludicrous speeds, it's just no possible way that they could possibly tether anything to the ground that would make it its way up into the outer spaces without getting tangled up on everything along the way, right? Well, just folks, there's a reason why they would hold the seventh international conference on tethers in space, okay, hosted up in Canada just the beginning of this month or last month, rather, actually now July, shoot, yeah, about a month or so ago. They held this big conference, a call for papers, international conference on tethers. Topics of interest: fundamental research on space tethers, space tether technology development, tether propulsion and energy generation, mission concepts, enabled mission, space environment research, planetary exploration and utilization. And here you go, folks. Do we really, really know exactly what is going on with SpaceX's Starlink things? I mean, they tell us that it's satellite, right? That it's so that we can have better satellite service and faster internet and provide internet and communications in remote areas and different things like that. But yeah, whatever. I mean, who's going to be able to refute any of that? You know, so they could very well be building a very large structure up there. And I tell you what, this whole original foundational structure that was formed for the whole DO line decades ago would serve as a good platform. I mean, you've already got these ground-based systems that are already like embedded into the bedrock and stabilized and have been there for years. You might as well go ahead and tether something up off of it, like a bunch of balloons with a bunch of different satellites, and do research and development. And if you're not, then you're wasting the amount of money that you're given for research and development, right?
Think about that kind of communication and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
I mean, clearly they're researching into it. Clearly it's been a topic for quite a while, actually, when I really look into it. And this is the conference proceedings here where they talk a little bit about some of the different programs. Um, some of this has to do with debris removal, right? Because supposedly we have all of these threats. It's identifying the 50 statistically most concerning derelict objects in the LEO. And in this particular paper here, They talk about this paper describes a process for identifying the intact objects in orbit that A, pose the greatest debris generating potential risk to operational satellites, or B, would reduce the risk the most if they were removed or prevented from colliding with each other. So, I talk about in the introduction here, while development of space debris mitigation and guidelines began in earnest in 1990s and space traffic management activities are accelerating, substantive operational debris remediation efforts have been slower to materialize. The reticence, or rather the silence and non-acknowledgement, non-discussion of the space community within the space community to execute debris remediation activities is primarily due to four issues, right? I think the main issue is because nobody wants to own up for just injecting things into our upper atmosphere and into the electrical magnetic current up there and own up to it. But they say the number one is the cost of debris remediation alternatives. It's uncertain, but probably expensive. Probably expensive, right? And their performance is unproven. And number two, ownership and access rights to physically manipulate and remove objects registered to other states are uncertain and potentially contentious. Really? Okay. But I thought you knew what every little piece of shit is up there, right? That's what they tell us. The objects most needed to be remediated have not been identified clearly in a multinational form to enhance space safety and ensure long-term space sustainability. And four, the attempt to remove or nudge a massive derelict, i.e. remediate, does pose the potential for unanticipated debris generation. Okay, this paper identifies and prioritizes a list of objects for debris remediation, okay? As a result, debris remediation concepts must be developed, tested, and deployed quickly to remove some of this hardware, right? Most of this stuff that's up there, a lot of it is spent rocket stuff. A lot of it is science experiments that were just injected up there, right? One means to motivate this process is to develop an internationally derived hit list of the statistically most concerning SMC objects in low Earth orbit with the greatest potential to disrupt space activity. While active debris removal ADR is often proposed, debris remediation alternatives such as just-in-time collision avoidance, long-term debris management, and nanotugs can also be applied to the list compiled in this paper. A JCA system would simply nudge one of two derelicts that are on a collision course to prevent that imminent collision. The impulse could be delivered by a physical cloud, such as an upper stage rocket plume, or a puff of talc from a ballistic trajectory, or by a laser. Possibly either ground-based or space-based. Right. Long-term debris management is a system that whereby a space-based laser system will provide multiple small impulses to derelicts to maintain their spacing to avoid collisions or even close approaches. So in other words, just beam this one over here so that it moves a little bit, and then beam this one over there. Just kind of pushed it a little bit out of the way, away from each other, while they're hurling and whirling up there in the upper atmosphere. It sounds ridiculous. It really does sound ridiculous. Okay, but this is what they say. Most of these objects were abandoned before 2000, but due to poor mitigation compliance since then, derelict mass continues to accumulate as depicted in Figure 1. Okay, folks, so if they had to go through and remove a bunch of stuff, they talk about these review of contact and contactless active space debris removal approaches using unmanned vehicles, unmanned spacecrafts, validation of models for net deployment and capture simulation with experimental data. This was from 2023 where they're talking about this stuff, okay? And a tethered satellite system analysis, two-dimensional case, and regular dynamics. And you can see there are so many different references. There's 24 different citations where you have all of these people from all these different countries and from all these different fields of science working this stuff out. I mean, dynamic model and control of mass distributed tethered satellite systems, suppression of chaotic motion of tethered satellite systems using tethered length control, dynamics and control of tethered satellite systems, study on the stability of tethered satellite systems, dynamics and control. I'm telling you, folks, they don't put together all of these different people and all of these different groups of people to just study this stuff for no specific reason. Okay. And if you wanted to control a massive airspace, you could very well do it by suspending tethers from ground-based systems on a non-rotating stationary plane. You absolutely could. And when we're talking about some of these systems that they're talking about, they are talking about suspending it from spacecrafts, such as, like, say, oh, I don't know, an X-37B or a little mini space shuttle setup, right? And this is stuff that's published out there for the public to view. And I don't think they just waste their time doing it for just nothing. Some of it could very well be a level of propaganda, but I do believe that there are truths in a lot of what they do put out there, and you just have to kind of read between the lines. And in this particular publication here that was put up by none other than NASA, right? From NASA headquarters, Office of Space Flight, right? Um, this was from 1986, August of 1986, talking about tethers. And, eh, you know, I know there are so many people that just think that it's ridiculous that they would not be able to do something like this, but I believe myself personally that they absolutely could. And when I see images like that right there, that's showing what looks like a spacecraft with a boom coming up out of it, and then you got this little ready for deployment, and then you got this little thing here that's been deployed, right? When I see stuff like that, after I've captured something like this, where before I ever even set eyes on this publication, it was only after I started researching into the suborbital crafts and some of their research into tethers in space using these suborbital crafts and stuff like that. And after I saw that image, I was like, really, the depiction that you're showing here, I mean, it looks like an X-37B, like a little mini shuttle with its bay doors open and a boom's extending up out of it, attached to a 12-meter expendable boom. I see something like that after I've captured something like this. And before I saw those images, I was breaking this down and I was adjusting the colors, and I saw what looked like a little mini space shuttle, like a little suborbital with the bay doors open and something extending up out of it that was attracting a great amount of energy. And it looked at sometimes like plasma. There's another video that shows this on a wider angle because this whole plume extended up and out and around, and it was just huge. And I could clearly tell there was something influencing the upper atmosphere, and it definitely had some kind of plasma in there. The way that some of this started glowing, even as it moved more to the southeast, you know, and it's just curious to me that when I captured this at the time, they weren't giving up any information on the suborbitals and the X-37B and some of the, projects and missions and research and development that they were doing at the time. And it wasn't until after I had posted that up and I started making inquiries with certain agencies like MUFON and different, with the FAA and everything and making inquiries, then all of a sudden the X-37Bs, they admit it. And when we look at these reference points, I mean, it's not just here in the US either. It's in Italy and it's in several other countries, China. I mean, this whole thing for Call for Papers is basically sponsored by China, and Spain, Canada. And I mean, Canada would probably be heavily involved, especially if they're attempting to put these things along the structure that was put in place of the dew line. And, when it comes to our communication lines and stuff, folks, surely a lot of y'all already know and have already seen, these depictions showing the cabling system that goes under the oceans. This is on the ocean floor. These are cabling systems that look like this. This is fiber optic. And there's a reason why this is encased inside of this type of a shielding right here. Okay, there's a reason why it's shielded. And it isn't just to protect the information and to protect it, this equipment and this cabling and all of this from the weather and from the elements. It's also to protect us from the radiation and from the frequency pollutions and from all of the negative impacts that just this amount of energy flowing through our atmosphere and in through our ecosystem has on us as human beings. There is such a thing as frequency pollution. This is something that was already researched, it was already looked into years and years and years and years and years ago, because I believe there was already wireless technology. There was already free Wi-Fi. There was already free flowing energy that they tapped into a long time ago. And they made a lot of mistakes. And one of the biggest mistakes they made was to create what I believe was the Carrington event. And they destroyed all kinds of shit after that. And there are people in charge right now, even today, that know full well that our history is not what they say that it is. And that years ago we were far more advanced. We had laser cutting technology that could carve into mountains, carve intricate statues out of limestone. We had all of that before, and they destroyed it. And it's a painful process to get it back, as Mr. Pettit would have said about going back to the moon, right? I believe we had a far more advanced civilization and society even than we have now. And they are just slowly backtracking, slowly getting back that technology. And we're only allowed to see what they want us to see. And I believe they have far more capabilities with power generation and nuclear power that they've already been using. But this is how we communicate. This is where we get our power from. It's from this cabling system. And there's a reason why they keep it protected and they keep it shielded in this and wrapped up like this. Not just to protect the components, but to protect human beings from that amount of energy being transmitted through those transmission lines of escaping out into our environment and having an impact on us. And I don't believe that it's so far-fetched for them to believe that they would have things like this up there and to be researching and developing this on a level that we wouldn't even begin to even know. They have so many people involved with it. There's so many different research groups that are involved with it. The United States tether studies being done, Ames Research Center, Goddard Space Flight Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Johnson Space Center. I mean, Langley is listed here. There's several colleges. Harvard, Stanford is listed into these into doing these different studies here too. Colorado State University, Lewis Research Center, University of Alabama. I mean, it's page after page of all kinds of people, all the smartest, the most brightest minds in the world, spending time researching and developing this type of technology that would allow them to tether their satellite systems. The Italian tether studies, Italy has been heavily involved in the research and the technology to develop it. And why wouldn't they be? They are, if we look at this map here, you can see they would definitely have a vested interest right up in here to maintain and keep a circular, what they would call a dew line, or a circular type of tethered system right here, right in the center, right up the highest point. It would most likely be the highest point of our domed system and of our covered system, where our ceiling is at the highest point. They could very well extend these tethered systems up in here and maintain them very easily. I just, I don't, I don't trust anything that's written in our history books. And when I capture something like this, and then I come across this information concerning research into applications of tethers in space, even, and this is volume 2, and this was put out in 1983. And I know it's NASA, consider the source, but these people have to put the truth out there somewhere. And nobody really knows exactly, and I can't say for certain that they've actually researched, developed, and deployed these, tethered systems. But when I look at some of the reference points and I see how many people are involved in these and the patents extending across multiple countries, I can see how it would be very easy for an agency like NASA or any other space agency or any other group of people to be able to control a certain narrative very easily. And when you're tethering systems along, something like this, and you have a very large circle where you have full control of anything coming in and out of this central point, you could broadcast anything from that point out. And by broadcast, I mean anything you wanted. And they talk about tethered constellations in this particular publication here for developing microgravity platforms. Who would have a use for microgravity platforms? I wonder who would have a use for a microgravity platform that would be tethered. It would be tethered. Okay, folks, there's a reason why they tell us that we live on a spinning ball that's spinning around at 1,000 miles an hour and hurling around the sun at 67,000 miles an hour and hurling through the universe at even more ludicrous speeds, because they don't want us to believe that something like this could be possible. They do not want us to believe that it would be possible for them to actually tether satellites to the ground and be able to use that as a platform to broadcast radio signals all the way around anywhere on this planet that you wanted to. You just aim that off in that direction and boom, boom, you got a signal received and a signal sent back. And you can absolutely control those frequencies. And that brings me back to this patent that I found in concerning a hearing system, where they talk about, you know, inducing sound in someone's head just by using a microwave generator, just by blasting sound at someone's head, you know. And I'll read this really quick here. So Science Magazine, volume 181, page 356, describes a hearing system utilizing a radio frequency carrier of 1.245 gigahertz delivered through the air by means of a waveguide and horn antenna. The carrier was pulsed at the rate of 50 pulses per second, and the human test subject reported a buzzing sound, and the intensity varied with the peak power. Folks, to think that they would not have already researched and developed and deployed these types of systems in order to be able to control a certain part of the world and the people within it. You truly naive, truly naive. And, I think that they've already had the ability to capture, harvest, if you want, energy from the upper atmosphere and from the electromagnetosphere and redirect it anywhere that they want. And like I said before, because I'm repetitive, I'll say it again. When I capture things like this and I see stuff like this with my own eyes, where clearly there's something drifting through the freaking sky here. Okay. I even contacted the local news because I thought this was just really just incredible. I mean, what was going on here back in August of 2019? What were they drifting down into the southern end of Nevada? What was this? It was something, because this sure as hell wasn't natural cloud formations. And, there was a little object drifting down right there. It looked to me like a very large piece of sheet metal of some kind, but what did you just bring down from the upper atmosphere? That's my question, because this thing looked like it was bringing along with it some pretty intense energy as it was drifting through. And this part right here, like I said, got brighter as it moved off to the southeast. So what exactly did they bring down into our atmosphere? What did you subject us to down here in southern Nevada back in August of 2019? You know what I mean? What was this beaming? I gotta question it. And then I see You know, I gotta question it. I just do. I know it doesn't look exact, of course, but you know, right there would be the bay doors.
As a result, I think the people in the Congress are going to support it. And that message calls for new frontiers, new visions. It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in science. It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer, and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.